What if I told you there's a mental technique capable of awakening an intelligence so deep it surpasses even the greatest geniuses in history, and more? This technique doesn't require you to speak louder, put yourself out there, or change your essence. On the contrary, it works precisely because you're introspective. The world never told you this because it chose to value noise over depth. But today, you'll discover what they don't want you to know, that your silence carries untapped power. In this video, you'll access hidden knowledge based on the research of Jacobo Grinberg that can turn your mind into a true machine of quiet genius. Get ready to break the conditioning that has limited your potential until now. Write in the comments, "My quiet mind is my greatest strength." This statement is not just a phrase, it's an invitation to transformation and the key to your new reality. Few names in the history of science dared to touch the frontiers between mind, reality, and consciousness like Jacobo Grinberg. A neurophysiologist, psychologist, and Mexican researcher, Grinberg devoted decades to investigating the mysteries of the human mind, uniting modern science with ancestral knowledge, especially the teachings of indigenous shamans. He didn't see the mind as a simple biological machine, but as an interface that creates reality. His neuronal field theory proposed that everything we experience is a projection of the individual perceptual structure. In other words, the way we think literally defines the world we see. But Grinberg went further. He believed that our mental states not only influence reality, they shape our intellectual potential. While most of science limited intelligence to fixed quotients and genetic inheritance, he asserted that the mind could be trained, expanded, and reorganized. His revolutionary approach was ignored by many, and mysteriously, he disappeared in 1994, leaving behind only his studies, practices, and the suspicion that he knew more than he should. It's on this legacy that this video dives into a forgotten yet powerful technique, a path to activate a deep, visual, silent, and absolutely brilliant intelligence. Since childhood, you've been exposed to a quiet idea, repeated so often it ended up being accepted as an absolute truth, that intelligence is something you either have or don't have. A gift, a genetic stroke of luck, a trait reserved for a chosen few, while the rest of humanity would be doomed to trail behind, trying to keep up. Perhaps you yourself have caught yourself thinking this way, watching someone solve a problem with ease, communicate with precision, or create something grand and asking, "Why doesn't my mind work like that?" But that idea is a trap, a conditioning, and above all, a lie. According to Jacobo Grinberg's research, the human mind is not a fixed structure, but a plastic, mutable, and expandable platform, capable of reorganizing itself according to the content it receives, the stimuli it processes, and the way it's used. Grinberg breaks with the deterministic model of inherited intelligence and proposes something infinitely more powerful: intelligence as a system, as the operational structure of consciousness, subject to training, adjustment, and elevation. This means that the so-called geniuses of history, from science to art, weren't born with something you lack. What they had was access to an alternative mental model, a mode of thinking not based only on memorizing or repeating, but on exploring, visualizing, and mentally experimenting with reality before it materialized. And here's the most important point: silent, introspective, reflective minds are naturally predisposed to this model. While the world values noise, quick answers, and fast thinking, the greatest discoveries almost always arise in silence. Geniuses like Einstein, Tesla, Newton, and so many others were, in essence, deeply introverted. They weren't chasing immediate applause, but deep understanding. They had what Grinberg would call an expanded perceptual structure, a mind trained to simulate, imagine, and interconnect ideas. The lie of fixed intelligence was a form of control. Because if you believe you can't change your mental capacity, you stop trying. You settle for following orders, repeating formulas, consuming ready-made information, and never explore the infinite potential that lies dormant within your mind. But now you know the intelligence you admire in others is not far from you. It exists in another mode of mental operation, and that mode can be activated. Especially if you're one of those people who always felt different, who think more than they speak, who experience the world in a deep and quiet way. You are not less intelligent. You were poorly trained, and from now on, you'll learn to rebuild your mental system, starting with freeing yourself from the lie that kept you trapped in a pattern that was never yours. Do you remember what the classroom was like? Neat rows, imposed silence, rigid schedules, and a voice at the front, repeating information while everyone was supposed to listen, write, and repeat. The traditional school model was not created to develop creative, questioning, or visionary minds. It was designed to train obedience, and that structure, seemingly harmless, was one of the greatest culprits in slowing the minds of millions of people. If you're introspective, reflective, if you've always preferred to think before speaking, it's very likely you were labeled distracted, slow, or even uninterested. The truth is that school never knew how to deal with your kind of mind. It forced you to adapt to a teaching model designed to reward the fastest, not the deepest. Those who raised their hands first, even without truly understanding, were seen as intelligent, while you, who might have been processing the idea more deeply, were ignored. Jacobo Grinberg pointed out that true development of consciousness requires expanded perception, active imagination, and silent reflection. None of these elements are encouraged in environments where the focus is on repeating content and obtaining grades. Traditional education, instead of developing your ability to think, taught you to shape yourself, to obey commands, memorize data, follow rules, but never to create internal structures of autonomous thought. This created a profound consequence. Many adults today doubt their own intellectual capacity. They carry the false idea that they are slow, undisciplined, unable to learn complex things. But in most cases, what really happened was that their mental model was atrophied by a system that discouraged introspection and killed genuine curiosity. If you've always struggled with traditional study methods, that doesn't mean your mind doesn't work. It means it works differently and needs different stimuli. Introverted minds think in layers. They build inner images, make non-obvious connections, and take longer because they're going deeper. But the system never valued that. The good news is that what was suppressed is still in there. The ability to reflect deeply, to visualize concepts in detail, to explore ideas freely, all of that can be recovered. You just need to change the mental environment and relearn how to learn your way. Grinberg believed that by breaking imposed patterns, a new form of intelligence reveals itself, a more organic, more intuitive, more powerful form, and that's exactly what you'll unlock as you take the next steps. There's a way of thinking that most people never learned, not because it doesn't work, but because it's too powerful to become popular. It was used by some of the greatest geniuses in history, but rarely taught in schools or mentioned in traditional curricula. Its name, hypervisualization. Jacobo Grinberg understood that the mind doesn't operate only with words, formulas, or repetition. He observed that the deepest states of intelligence arise when the mind can visualize ideas with sharpness, as if they were being experienced inside a mental movie. This technique isn't fiction. It's applied neuroscience. The brain doesn't clearly distinguish what is imagined from what is lived. And that's exactly why intense visualization can be as transformative as the real experience. Hypervisualization consists of mentally rehearsing concepts, ideas, or goals in a sensory, vivid, three-dimensional way. It's not about positive thinking or merely imagining a scene. It's about simulating mentally with depth, seeing, hearing, feeling, and even testing ideas in the mind as if they were real. Albert Einstein, for example, didn't start with equations. He imagined himself riding on a beam of light. Nikola Tesla visualized fully functioning machines in his mind before he ever touched a tool. This is not a gift. It's training. And here's the most important detail. Introverted minds already do this naturally. When you catch yourself thinking too much, reliving scenes, imagining possibilities, creating stories in your head, that's not distraction. That's latent hypervisualization ability. What's missing is direction, intention, and repetition. Unlike traditional memorization, which uses only parts of the brain, intense visualization activates sensory, emotional, and motor areas, fixing knowledge more deeply and durably. When you see an idea unfold in your mind, it stops being abstract. It becomes experience, and it's not just about learning. Hypervisualization can be applied to solve problems, make decisions, prepare presentations, plan projects, or develop skills. You can imagine each step before executing it, mentally testing the path before putting it into practice. This saves time, energy, and amplifies results. The reason this technique isn't widely publicized is simple. It takes control away from the traditional education system and gives power back to the individual. By teaching people to think with depth, autonomy, and creativity, you make them free. And a free mind is impossible to manipulate. Hypervisualization is the bridge between ordinary thinking and quiet genius. It doesn't require noise, titles, or external recognition. Only silence, intention, and practice. And now that you know this technique, the choice is in your hands. Keep thinking as you always have, or start seeing like a true genius. While the world celebrates speed, busyness, and multitasking, there's a quiet intelligence that grows in the opposite direction, in deep focus. And if you're introverted, this is a skill that already lives in you. It just needs polishing. We're surrounded by stimuli, notifications, social media, sounds, demands, distractions. The ordinary mind fractures trying to respond to everything at once. But the trained mind, especially the mind that values silence, knows that depth is worth more than quantity. While many pride themselves on doing several things at the same time, the true leaps of genius happen when someone allows themselves to dive completely into a single idea. Jacobo Grinberg understood that deep focus is more than concentration. It's an altered state of consciousness, a point where the brain leaves beta mode, agitated, analytical, and superficial, and enters alpha and theta waves associated with creativity, insight, and mental reorganization. This state is what many call flow, a space where time seems to disappear, the mind grows quiet, and all that exists is the creative process. Introverts have a natural predisposition for this state. Because they don't need constant external stimuli, they can remain longer in quiet, contemplative, creative tasks. It's in this space that the magic happens. Ideas connect, problems resolve, intuitions arise. Not because the outer world changed, but because the inner world gained room to breathe. To activate this power, you don't need to isolate yourself from the world. 20 to 30 minutes a day with clear intention is enough. It could be writing, reading something dense, building a mental project, sketching connections between ideas, or simply contemplating an important question. The secret lies in the absence of distractions and the depth of attention. Imagine a magnifying glass. Most people use the mind like a flashlight. It lights up everything a little, but nothing deeply. Deep focus is a magnifying glass placed over a specific point. With enough time and heat, it creates fire. That's where big insights arise. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Society doesn't value this kind of intelligence because it isn't immediate. It doesn't shout, it doesn't display, it doesn't make noise, but it transforms profoundly. The greatest inventors, artists, and thinkers in history knew this. They disappeared for hours into their own thoughts and returned with something the world had never seen. You don't need to compete with the world's hurry. Your power lies in your ability to go deep where others only skim the surface. In silence, your brain finds the space to reorganize information, make connections, and create something truly original. Deep focus isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for anyone who wants to escape mental mediocrity and access higher levels of thought. And you have everything you need to get there. Just use silence as your bridge. You've heard the phrase, "you think too much," probably as a criticism, but what if that overthinking is exactly what sets you apart? What many see as overthinking can, when well directed, become the heart of quiet genius. The secret isn't to think less, but to think better. Introverted minds have a unique trait. They deepen ideas before accepting them. While most people react immediately to stimuli, you observe, reflect, analyze. That apparent slowness is actually the basis of strategic intelligence. It's as if your brain had a second processor that reviews everything carefully, connecting data, memories, experiences, and sensations to generate denser, more original insights. Jacobo Grinberg believed that this kind of structured thinking, built in layers, is what allows consciousness to access subtler levels of reality. When you connect a current idea to something you read months ago, or to an old memory, or even to a recurring feeling, you're not being random. You're practicing what we can call internal network thinking, a kind of reasoning that goes beyond linear logic and approaches systemic intelligence. And here comes the formula. The genius of quiet minds is born from the combination of three elements: deep reflection, not accepting ready-made answers, but investigating, feeling, comparing. This introspection allows you to see nuances where others only see the surface. Hypervisualization. Already discussed earlier, this is the ability to mentally experience ideas and scenarios, building mental images that make knowledge tangible and memorable. Directed curiosity, the genuine interest that makes you dive into topics, explore possibilities, and revisit concepts with new questions. It's not about wanting to know everything. It's about wanting to understand deeply what matters to you. When these three elements are applied together, a powerful phenomenon emerges: original thinking. You don't just reproduce what you've learned, you start generating new connections, new perspectives, new solutions. And that is what sets geniuses apart. Not how much they know, but how they think. This formula doesn't require charisma, exposure, or supernatural gifts. It only requires that you trust your way of processing the world, even if it's different from the standard, because it is. People who speak little usually observe a lot, and those who observe deeply understand beyond the obvious. What's often missing is simply the self-confidence to trust your own mental structure. You already think on multiple levels. You already connect ideas in uncommon ways. You already feel the world richly. Now all you need is to organize this flow, direct it with intention, and feed your mind with what truly matters. Genius doesn't lie in the volume of your words, but in the quiet architecture of your thought. Genius isn't born in sudden moments of inspiration. It's built quietly, day after day, in small choices that are repeated with intention. For an introverted mind, which naturally seeks depth and silence, creating a routine that respects and amplifies these traits is the key to accessing higher levels of intelligence and mental clarity. Modern life pushes everyone toward noise, but true progress happens when you decide to step out of autopilot and create a rhythm that nourishes your mental system. For that, you don't need flashy techniques or long journeys. What you need is ritual, consistency, and direction. Something as simple as starting the day with a single question can change everything. An open question, with no pressure, just an invitation to curiosity. What idea haven't I explored yet today? This kind of subtle prompt wakes the brain without demanding immediate productivity. Instead of triggering anxiety, it activates imagination. During the day, setting aside a short window, even just 20 minutes, to dive deeply into a single thought can have a transformative impact. This immersion time can be dedicated to visualizing a project, to the silent analysis of a situation, or to contemplating an idea you want to develop. The key is to do it away from distractions and with full presence. In that moment, the mind begins to operate in layers. It starts making links, rebuilding meanings, extracting insights. It's in this space of quiet focus that the introverted brain flourishes. At night, what many see as a time to switch off, you can turn into a moment of growth. Instead of seeking distractions to numb the fatigue, use a few minutes to reflect. Jot down a question that arose during the day, an unexpected idea, a recurring thought. Not to find answers immediately, but to leave these points in creative suspension. Your brain will keep working while you sleep. The night can be an invisible workshop where the mind organizes what it quietly gathered. This daily cycle, waking with curiosity, diving with focus, and closing with reflection, creates a cumulative effect. It generates what we call mental momentum. Each small action strengthens the previous one. Over time, you'll notice you're clearer, more intuitive, more creative. Ideas that used to be vague become structured. Doubts turn into decisions. Silences gain meaning. You don't need to change your essence to access your potential. You just need to align your routine with the way your mind already works. Structure isn't the enemy of freedom. It's through structure that your mental freedom expands. The world doesn't teach this. But those who discover this quiet truth build within themselves a power no one can see, but everyone inevitably feels. In a world that rewards those who speak louder, react faster, and are constantly on display, thinking deeply can seem like a disadvantage. Silence is mistaken for weakness, introspection for insecurity. But what few understand is that this silence is actually fertile ground where true mental power is cultivated. Being deep in a superficial world takes strength, and that strength must be protected. The sensitive, analytical, observant mind picks up more details than most people. But that sensitivity, if poorly managed, can become a burden. Not because you're weak, but because you're trying to absorb what the entire world is shouting all at once. That's why, to maintain your clarity, it's essential to develop a special kind of mental shielding, the ability to observe without absorbing. You don't have to react to everything, nor do you need to be available all the time. Learning to create boundaries, not just with people but with stimuli, is one of the greatest acts of respect you can have for your mind. This is not isolation, it's preservation. Silence, solitude, and space aren't obstacles to progress. They're tools. They're the ideal environment where real thinking deepens, organizes itself, and grows stronger. Jacobo Grinberg understood that excessive external noise interferes with the construction of internal reality. When you're immersed in a constant flow of information, opinions, and demands, your mind enters a fragmented state. It becomes harder to think clearly, perceive patterns, or access deep intuitions. The neuronal field that Grinberg studied so intensely becomes unbalanced. But when you withdraw, even for a few minutes a day, something begins to reorganize inside you. Thought begins to flow again. The gaze sees again. The mind breathes again. To stay mentally strong, you don't need to withdraw from the world, but you do need to learn not to let it invade your inner space without permission. You can consume information without being consumed by it. You can hear opinions without losing yourself in comparisons. You can observe chaos without disconnecting from your peace. This quiet strength doesn't seek validation. It's sustained by the truth it carries within. And the more you practice this mental protection, the more you realize you don't need to compete with the world's volume. Your value lies in the depth of what you see, feel, and understand. While many get lost trying to prove something to others, you stand firm by understanding who you are. The world will remain noisy, but within you there can be an inviolable space of clarity, intuition, and direction. And it's this space that sustains true thinkers, those who, even in silence, transform everything around them with the invisible force of a structured mind. Now that you know this quiet, deep, and transformative mental technique, the decision is in your hands. You don't need to do everything at once. Start small. Choose just one of the methods you learned here, whether hypervisualization, deep focus, a reflection routine, or the simple practice of protecting your mind from excessive noise. What matters is not the complexity of what you do, but the consistency with which you do it. Genius doesn't arrive with fanfare. It's born in moments of silence, conscious choice, and intentional repetition. And now you have the map to access this within yourself. It's not about becoming someone else, but about activating what has always existed inside you, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Apply it, experiment, trust your own process. And if this content touched you in any way, share it with someone who needs to rediscover the strength that exists in quietude. Comment below on how you intend to put this into practice. Your experience may be the turning point for another brilliant, sleeping mind. And if you're not yet subscribed, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, because this is only the beginning of a profound journey toward your true intelligence.